Go.
Hey there, we are back. I know you all missed us, but we are back after a couple-week hiatus, vacation, and some other things going on. So when I say we, I'm talking about myself, Pastor Jeff Steele Stieber, however you want to approach it, from Avon Lake, Ohio, outside of Cleveland, and my dear friend and colleague, Pastor Andrew Gukin up in Rochester, New York. Both pastors, for anybody who sees this outside of the videos that we've already done, pastors in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, part of the Lutheran Church. And today we have a topic that I'm hoping, I think we're hoping, will be fun for people to watch. There's a lot of seriousness going on and a lot of serious things that need to be addressed and discussed right now. And we both pray about those things and have conversations about them. And yet for the next however long, we've decided that we were going to kind of take an approach of let's try to lighten some things up and then take a little break from all of the other serious business that we're getting into. So the topic that I want to go over today is the idea of how you portray yourself as a pastor, and basically, do you fit the general mold, in your opinion, your experience, or what other people have told you, do you fit the general mold of what people think a pastor looks like, how a pastor behaves, how that might look within the church, and how that might look outside of the church? And then if we have time to get into the idea or the experience of what happens when people who have met you or who know you find out that you're a pastor, and how does that affect or change things? What are their responses? So I will start off by saying that in general, I personally do not think that I fit the typical mold of the stereotypical this is what a Protestant member of the clergy looks like, this is what they sound like, and this is what they behave like. And I don't mean any deviant ways. I'm just saying in the general approach, when people meet me or they come to the church where I serve or the churches where I've served, some people really like it and other people do not like it. But the reality is when they interact with me, a lot of times I will hear the comments such as, well, you're different from our previous pastor, or you're different from the other types of pastors that I've known or been around in my life. So I could keep going on forever about that, but I want to throw that just initial generalization back to Pastor Andrew about, is that similar to your experience as well? That do you think people, when they see you, go, oh yeah, that's exactly what a pastor looks like, that's exactly how a pastor sounds and how a pastor behaves, or is that different?
Yeah, so good question. Good
Thank
topic.
you. It only took us an hour and 15 minutes to get to this, so very good.
No, I had a lot of the same experiences. I think our vocation is like many others. You might meet someone, I think Pastor Jeff, you had mentioned this, and I've done that too. Like our kids are in concerts or plays or what have you, and you might meet other parents at those things, and they don't necessarily know what we do, and we can have a relationship where we see them. Maybe we go get drinks with them or something, and then it's like oh yeah, well, what do you do? And there's always that pause, because in my experience, it's like, all right, this could be a turning point in this budding relationship. So there's always that pause where you're just like, oh, well, I'm a minister. And for me, it's gone a couple different ways. One, oh, that's nice. And I kind of rejoice in that. But I'm still hesitant because now there's some things out there. Or it might go, people react and they'll say, oh, and then they might apologize because if they were swearing, and it's like, yeah, you have no idea. Um, but then also they feel that they need to suddenly confess or tell me the last time they were in church, or where they go to church and why, um, and that kind of thing. Or it goes to, if they don't go to church and for some reason, I want to say they maybe were wounded by the church, larger church, then we enter into that kind of discussion. So, but I think I was thinking about that actually lately, and never been in the career of another career. I wondered if that happened, to other people, if that was something that was on their mind, uh, just a short thing, I mean, I worked in some factories and people would be like, oh, what do you do? Oh, well, I work on a CNC machine. And they're like, oh, what's that? Oh, that's interesting. Or, oh, great. Okay. But it's just a bit different, I think, for us too, because um, religion is just one of those things that can be great, but then is also toxic for people sometimes. So anyway, that's been my experience initially with that, and and that can make it hard when I mean, both Pastor Jeff and I, we're in our third congregation. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So we're both in these congregations, and we're trying to make friends, be it through the church or outside the church congregation, and it can be kind of difficult because there's always that hesitation.
Yeah. And now, so do you find yourself? I know I do, and you I don't want to say you alluded to it, but I know personally speaking that when I meet somebody outside of the congregation, somebody who I believe, whether it's through my kids or typically through my kids, but that I might have an ongoing relationship with, I do my best to keep it from them that I am a pastor. And I realize, as I say that out loud, a lot of that might be with like just the stuff that's going on in my head and my personal experience. It doesn't mean anything about the person. Like they might be like, oh, cool, like high five me and, go on with their day, and it doesn't change anything. But that hasn't been, in general, hasn't been my experience. And so I will, I don't lie, and say, well, I do something else, but I've learned to navigate conversations away from talking about profession, occupation, so that I don't have to answer that. And particularly, I don't want to, sounds weird. I don't want to say it's a sign almost that if I met somebody outside of the church that I really liked them, if it took a really long time for them to find out that I was a pastor, because I was just trying to protect that budding friendship, or I was fearful of something happening to it. But I know I'll do the same thing, even if I've had several members of congregations where I've served, where because of family dynamics and everything we've lined up a little bit, my family with their family a little bit better, of like our station in life. And they'll invite us over for a party for one of their kids or, whatnot, for a holiday. And if we say yes, I've learned to say to them, please do not tell anyone at this party that I'm your pastor. If it somehow comes up, that's fine, but don't leave. Because in my experience, a lot of times I'd go over, we'd have a party and someone like, that's how they know, oh, this is my pastor, which is true. But it changes the dynamic right away. I am no longer me. I am like the institution of clergy. I'm representing something that has impacted potentially the person in their personal life. Even though I have not had any contact with them, I have then become the face of this thing. And it's not uncomfortable for me. It's just, I think as much as it's in my own head, I don't like it when people project their past negative experiences with other things
Mm.
onto me. Um, so when you say that it changes the dynamic for you as well, do you find yourself going out of your way to not tell people what you do? Or if you do go to people's functions, do you do the same thing I do where you say like, hey, ixnay on the whole Astor pay thing? Or how do you handle that?
Yeah, so a little different. I don't, Pastor Jeff, I don't want you to hear that
Just lay it on.
you're
Do
in a
it. And then
different
rip
place.
the Band-Aid off. Yeah.
No, for the first few years of ministry, I did kind of that. I did practice that where it's like, oh, hey, don't tell anyone, or, I would steer the conversation away. But after a while, I said, I don't, that made me uncomfortable too. So I don't necessarily offer that information up, but if it comes up in the conversation, then I don't shy away from it. Not saying that's what you do, but I say, oh yeah, I'm a pastor, and then because I think it's happened so much, and especially in 15 years of ministry and things like that, that it's just like, just get it out there. I don't, yeah, and I don't tell people. I'm thinking of some friends of ours here that have they've had different people over, and I'm thinking we went over there because they had a Sunday night, like Sundays ice cream.
Yeah.
And there are some people I'd never met, and we were there for, I want to say, like 5-6 hours, and we're talking in the backyard. And then it was I think their daughter just said something like, "Oh, hey, Pastor Andrew," and
Yeah.
and this
Yeah.
couple, like
Oh,
this couple, and we were drinking beers and stuff and things. This couple suddenly just like sat straight up and like looked at their beers and then looked at my beer like, well, wait,
started
what's
singing. They were
happening?
like, "Amazing
Yeah,
Grace."
it was, and they're like, we didn't know you were a pastor. And I'm like, yeah. And I owned it, I identified it. Obviously, I was just like, yeah, so does that, I said, it doesn't change anything, They're like, well, yeah, but I don't know. But that actually led to a very constructive conversation because it was also a time for them to just open up, and they didn't immediately say, oh, well, I went to church, but now I don't, and I feel guilty. It was just like, hey, can I talk to you about something? And I think that's just kind of how I've approached it, probably for the last at least 10 years. Just to, because the thing is, and that's one thing I didn't say before, is I truly believe, the guy you see in the pulpit or on Sunday morning is the same person you're going to see Monday through Saturday. I mean, not all of it. I mean,
They don't want to see all of it, but yeah.
yeah,
No,
right.
I
You
get
don't
what
want to see all of it, but
you're saying.
I just try and be as genuine as I can. And
Yeah.
I think even growing up and thinking about my own pastor when I started to go to church and stuff, it's you just have to be genuine about it, because I think people have this mentality of, this is how ministers are,
Right.
and maybe you've experienced this too. We wear collars, well, we can, and
I do occasionally.
but people see that, and there's just that ingrained in them. They're like, oh, that's a priest, so like, I don't know how many times you've been called father, but I've been called father quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
In fact, one of our peers from seminary, he told me when he moved and started in his first church, he was grocery shopping with his family, and this old woman came up and smacked him because she thought he was a priest and he had a secret family.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just try and be genuine, and I think that's what you have to do, because there's I think there's too many pastors, especially that I've experienced in the last 15 years, colleagues,
Yeah.
and they're great people, but they make that definite boundary of, I'm
Yeah.
the pastor, and so you will just give me respect. And it's like, I think there's that dynamic, and I think that needs to be there, but I think it's more human respect, respecting other people as brothers and sisters. Oh, now that in itself got kind of pastory, but
Yeah.
um,
But that's a
yeah,
good point though. So I think that kind of, and we're even doing well on time, I think, that addresses our presentation of ourselves outside of the congregation. Like you
yeah,
said, um, I won't shy away from it, but I do readily admit that out of my own insecurities, um, I don't, um, if it's going to be an issue with somebody, I guess it's going to be an issue. And I'll never be able to go forever without someone finding out. And if I'm going to be their friend at some point, that's going to come out. I guess I like just try to give myself enough buffer
mm,
area to be like, hey, do you like me enough before you learn this so that you'll still like me?
yeah,
That, but so how does that translate? And I'll give the conversation I've even had with someone at my congregation where I'm serving now. But how does that transition into that? I won't say the image, but just the who you are with people within the congregation, both good and bad. And I've had a lot of good with it, but I remember I sat down with a member of my congregation, had a really constructive talk. But the reality is, the pastor who served where I'm currently at, just like the pastors everywhere I've served, um, I'm no matter how close I was personality wise to my predecessor, I'm never the same person.
mm-hmm,
Um, and in this case, I happen to diverge from the predecessor in a lot of different ways, personality wise. He's one of I consider him a friend and a colleague. He's an amazing person. Um, but we're two different styles and approaches to pastoral ministry. And for some people who were used to that style, my style kind of became, well, for them, no, a pastor behaves inside the church, a pastor behaves like this.
yeah,
And so, my approach to a worship service is, I like high church stuff, what we refer to as high church stuff. So I would like smells and bells. I'm all about all of that. I don't need it. I like liturgy, but I'm not somebody who's very rigid to the point where if somebody messes up a reading, if an acolyte lights this candle instead of that candle first, you know, if something happens during communion where, somebody drops a piece of bread or wafer on the ground, like, I don't freak out. I'm like, yeah, it's fine, and I also, during like when we make announcements or just during the service, if there are areas where I can add a little bit of myself to the service, um, and bring a little bit of I would consider to be joy or playfulness to it, I'll do it. And for some people I know, that joy or that willingness to just kind of talk on a very common level or expose myself, not in not in an improper way, but to make myself vulnerable and be like, yeah, these are my shortcomings. This is where I mess up.
yeah,
This is where I struggle. For some people, and this individual, it was, well, am I being reverent enough? Am I
right,
being respectful of the office? And no, there should be silence between this point and this point in the service. And there shouldn't be ever like any kind of laughter, or you're in the communion line. It should just be people getting ready, they receive, they go back, and there shouldn't be like any, oh, hey, it's great to see you, or, banter with children or whatever. And what I stated, and like I said, it was a very constructive conversation. was my approach is one where I realized, especially for guests at our congregation, I realize I may have one shot at conveying who I am as a pastor and what I believe about our congregation to those people, because they may never come back. And I want them, as well as all of our members, to feel comfortable with me, to feel like I am a real person, that if they have an issue, they can come talk to me. They don't have to be perfect or put on airs or certain, faces, even though we all do that. I want someone to feel like, hey, I can sit down and just talk to you, be really approachable. But that doesn't always go over well with everybody. The person I talked to where I'm serving now, it didn't turn out negative. Like I said, it was a really good conversation, and he understood a lot better why that there was a method to the madness that seems like madness at times. But I'm intentionally, I think, and you're saying it too, I'm intentionally me, in part because that's what I would want if I were looking for a pastor. So has that, in general, I will say most people, especially if after I've been at a place for a little while, most people, if you're still at the congregation, then you like the version of me that is up there. Or you're miserable. It's one of the two, because I'm there and you're just planning on outliving me. But has that been, how has your experience been about being that genuine self and not trying to be this perfect hair pastor with people? Has that gone well for you? Have there been any hiccups or?
I don't know if there's been any hiccups, but I mean, I really relate to what you're saying because really, what I'll tell people is, I want everyone to feel comfortable in worship. So really where I'm coming from with worship is I want everyone to feel relaxed. Coming to church shouldn't give us any kind of anxiety.
Right.
I get some anxiety sometimes because I'm up front, and one thing that seems to surprise people is I'm definitely afraid of public speaking.
Yeah.
So some people are like, oh, well, because we'll do announcements. I'll do announcements at the beginning of the service. And they're like, oh, well, do that at the end, maybe. And it's like, yeah, I can't do it at the end because then I'm getting ready to shake your hands. When I do the announcements, my hands get so sweaty because I'm so nervous.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And even though I have everything written down, I mean, I'm just so nervous because that's public speaking. Now, people say, yeah, but that's all you do. I mean, you're preaching. And I say, yeah. And you know what? That was one of those, in a sense, Jesus moments for me. Yeah. Because I tell them the first time that I gave a sermon, which was in seminary,
right?
Obviously, in that class, I got up there. The pulpit was back here in that little chapel, which
Shank Chapel.
Shank Chapel.
I was in your class. Yeah.
At Trinity. I got up there and I looked up at the dome or whatever in front.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, all right, here we go. Because I mean, that was the moment for me. I'm like, let's see if I can do this. Yeah. Because I was so anxious about that, and I stood up there, and and going up to it, I'm just like, all right. So like the night before, I'm like, tomorrow I'm gonna find out if this is if I'm gonna do this or if I'm gonna go back and be a whatever, work in a factory or learn how to fix cars or something, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And I turned around and I stepped into that pulpit, and it was just one of those times there was just this warmth, and I'm just like, yeah, let's do this. Yeah. And so that's how I can do that. So anyway, I say that, but worship should be, I think it should be a relaxing experience. It's a celebratory experience. I tell everyone, I was like, this is the party. When we gather on Sunday, this is the party for everything else. The work and church is here, but it's out there. Right. This is where the church comes to be like, hey man, let's celebrate everything. Right. So anyway, all of that to say, what was your original thing there?
Just the idea of being genuine.
just being genuine and relaxed. If the organist starts to play the wrong hymn, which has happened in every church,
Yeah.
uh, you know, I I know some other pastors, they would just get, oh, well, worship is ruined. And it's like, are you
Right.
joking?
Right.
If this one, I think, gets me in trouble, and because I know there's a lot of people that disagree, but honestly, whatever. Um, when well, which we won't be able to do for a while, which I actually grieve, when people share the peace, and it's like, oh, well, when you share the peace, you just share the peace. That's not a social time. And I'm like, why not? I was like, yeah, oh, God's peace with you. How's your kids? Okay, great. I mean,
Yeah.
and I feel that it's on me, and to be like, all right, let's come back together. But why shouldn't people? I mean, it's like, oh, well, they need to do that outside of worship. And I'm like, why? you
Yeah.
know if anything, it's like, hey, let's, I think I've done it once in 15 years where I'm like, all right, hey, let's come back together. And I'm like, it sounds like, today's a social day, so let's stay for coffee and crumpets or whatever, and hey, let's
Yeah. Yeah.
continue that then. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we need to celebrate that. Yeah, if I'm up there and I'm saying the words of institution and I say a line twice, or I make a mistake,
Yeah.
uh, it's fine. And
Yeah.
I have had some people say, oh, there needs to be more reverence there. And I think what people, for everything that I do or don't get upset about, and if someone mentions it, there's going to be a reason behind it. Well,
Right.
why do you say it's a party? I'll say, all right, let's have a conversation.
Right.
So and so, or this happened and this happened, or I don't think you were reverent enough with this. And I was like, all right, well, let's talk about that.
Right.
Um, I honestly think once people learned that that's going to be my answer, they don't say anything.
Because they don't want to have a conversation about it.
They're like,
Yeah.
he has, but I tell everyone, I said, there's a reason for
Right.
everything.
Yeah.
And like the organist messes up, and she was so upset. And so I'll talk to her after. I said, that doesn't bother me, right? I said,
Right.
I mean, we don't come into church and suddenly we're all perfect. I said,
Right.
in fact, if we did, then why are we coming together?
Right.
I said, we're all imperfect, and we're just
Yeah.
blessed to be imperfect together.
Yeah.
Long past your answer.
No, but that's the only answer you can give. So, yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And I guess for me, the additional part would be, it sounds like, I could be wrong, but it sounds like, so you've made peace with that, of just this, of that pastoral identity. And that's one of the things in seminary, on our internships, and when we're first starting out, there's this real focus on, what your pastoral identity is. And, God has called you to do this because you have these gifts, and my gifts are not the same gifts as your gifts. And we were talking about another one of our seminary friends before we started taping, and his gifts are not the same gifts as my gifts, and not the same gifts as Andrew's. So for me, I've struggled a little bit more to find personal acceptance with those things. I will, in all honesty, if a mistake is made during the service by anybody else who's helping, if there's a baby crying like crazy or just doing whatever, I'm cool with that. Like, it doesn't bother me at all. If I mess up, I get a little in my head like, Jeff, come on, man, you should have had that. But anybody else, extending that grace, and I think, going with what you're saying, and to make it pastoral as well, a lot of that is rooted in my experience of God.
Mm.
It's not necessarily something at seminary where they said, you should treat the congregation like this. It's just my relationship with God and my experience of God, and my feeling such an overwhelming sense of God's grace for the areas where I've fallen short, that I want other people to feel that same grace too. I don't want anyone, whether or not, in this kind of full circle of people outside of the church, I would never want somebody to think that I did not want them or did not accept them wherever they are at, and would not want them to be part of that conversation and part of that celebration. I wouldn't. And so I approach it the only way I know how. And it doesn't always go over well with everybody. Even though I'm going to have to do it when we're going back to in-person worship very, very soon. And because of distancing, I'm going to be using the pulpit. I don't typically use the pulpit. I've had people say to me, you should use the pulpit more. And I go, yeah, I don't like to, It's just not where I feel comfortable. I'm going to have to now. I'm going to have to make peace with that for the time being. But even those things that just knowing that you nailed it, I think, that one of the things I would hope people would know about me, and you'd say for yourself as well, is that I'm intentional in the actions that I think need to be intentional, and I'm very flexible in everything else, and even some of the intentionality is to be flexible. But there's a design to it. I've reflected on why I am the way I am. And my prayer is that when people are around me, that they get that as much as I can give them the experience of welcome that I feel Jesus gives. And so just being a conduit for that. And there's not an either or for me. It's just a lot of inclusion. So I think that'll be an interesting thing for us as we go forward. It'll be an interesting thing, and maybe a different topic for a segue for another week, is, my kids' only experience with church, for the most part, is anywhere I've served. Mm. That's their experience of the Lutheran Church. And it's going to be eye-opening to them, just like anybody who grew up with one pastor at the same church their entire life and going, well, that's what a pastor is like. It's going to be interesting, and I pray that my kids continue to go to church. And if it's able to be at my place, great, and most likely it will not be. I pray that they continue to go to church somewhere as they get older. It's going to be interesting because they're going to have to wrestle with the same thing in a different way of, well, no, a pastor looks like this, and for me to hopefully be able to say to them, no, they don't all look like anything. Now it helps. And I'll be honest with this too, for anyone who's still watching, it helps when my kids get to meet, when they interact or talk via Zoom with Pastor Andrew, or they hear conversations, appropriate conversations that happen with my colleagues, that I do my best as well, even with my kids, to show them, they know what I'm like, but I'll be like, yeah, this is what me and my friends who are also pastors talk about. We have it, and they're like, oh wow. I'm like, see, we're all crazy, or we're all goofy, or so that would be I think that would be a good topic, if you're cool with it, for the next time to discuss. We've kind of gone over outsiders, if you will, people that don't attend our churches, people in our congregations, and how we interact and our intentions behind that. I think it might be a good topic to discuss what our hope is for the youth and for kids in our church, the kind of experience we want them to have, so that when they get older, we hope that we've been able to instill this picture of the church or pastors for them, so that they can build off that, and go into the future. I think that'd be
I think that's a good, that sounds good for next time or whatever. I hope you remember it, because I'll forget.
Yeah, I already have no idea what I said. So good luck. I'll do my best to remember it. So, well, I don't know if there's anything else on. I mean, we could talk as always forever about these things. I don't know if there's anything else on this topic that you really want to cover. As always, I'll open that up for you. But as always, if you're able to and you want to, if you enjoyed the video, leave some kind of comments, leave always future topics if there's anything you want us to cover, and let us know what your experiences have been. It doesn't have to all be praise or anything like that. As long as it's constructive, we welcome it, and we thank you if you have stuck with us and watched this for any kind of help this was able to provide. Comfort. We appreciate you being with us. And if there's anything else you want to say, fantastic.
Nope, it sounds good.
All right. I have a Pastor Andrew story for today, but I'm going to save it for next week because I'm going to share it with him after we hit stop on the recording, because I have to get his permission to share it beforehand. But that's a teaser for next week. Yes. So, all right. God's peace, my brother.
Right. God's peace. Thanks.
All right. Bye.